Okay, you're live.
Hello, hello, hello. Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup. What's today? Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. I have to tell you, there's too many miles on these tires. Too many miles on these tires because every time I start the show and give you the date, I'm literally losing track of what year it is. That's how exhausted I am. I was about to say 2024. But then I remembered we're in year 2021. So I'm hoping Ron Placone could help me with that today. He's a little bit more sane than I am. But big show today. Having Ron on, I think really just for a stream of conscious type of show. No one topic, but I was on the road for 2 weeks, covering obviously the John Deere strikes in Iowa and Illinois, and then in Buffalo with everything. India Walton's election, which she lost, the Starbucks workers union drive, the Mercy Hospital nurses on strike. Two of those stories right now have significant momentum, not taking credit or anything. But the Mercy Hospital workers that were on strike, that's 2,000 hospital workers, they agreed to a contract after striking for over a month. So that's good news. Then you have the Starbucks workers, which today, November 10th, despite Starbucks' last minute filing with a judge to stop the ballots from going out and stop the union election in Buffalo from starting, ballots are going out today, despite Starbucks' horrendous union busting, which included former chairman or chairman emeritus Howard Schultz, literally going to a local hotel in Buffalo and the workers being mandated there to use a Holocaust analogy in their efforts to union bust. So maybe we'll talk about that too. But without further ado, Ron Placone, who is nice enough to join me on short notice. I asked him like an hour ago, "Hey, can you come on?" How you doing, Ron?
What's up, Jordan? Good to see you, buddy. And appreciate all of the coverage y'all have been doing. I've been able to catch some of it. So yeah, that's I wanted to ask you. I know it's a little weird if I open up with a question, but
Let's get weird. Let's
well,
get
what
weird.
so I mean, to quote one of the great philosophers of our time, Hillary Clinton, what happened in Buffalo? I mean, because so she beats the guy in a primary. And then he starts this big write-in campaign, and it was a significant margin, right? I mean, it was something like 65 to 35. I
He
mean,
won.
what
What did he win? 58-41. So yeah,
so it
17
closed a
points.
little bit. Okay,
17
so
points. Yeah.
but that's
Mhm.
still significant. Like what? I mean, because you were on the ground. Like what went on exactly? Like did this guy campaign against socialism, or did he just kind of sleep through the primary, not thinking he had anything to worry about? I mean,
Yeah.
what?
So wonderful question. Glad to answer it. By the way, folks, smash that like button. Already 100 watching. Ron knows, and I know. YouTube doesn't particularly like to pump us up in their algorithm. In fact,
No.
they like to hide us. So you could help by pressing the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to Ron's channel. What is it? Get your news
Just Ron
on with Ron.
Placone. Yeah,
Ron
YouTube Ron
Placone.
Placone. Yeah. The show's
Ron
called Get Your
Placone.
News On with Ron, but you can just find me Ron Placone on everything.
Yeah. And we'll pump you up later too. So my impression, I think there's this, and this we'll talk about this also with the national progressives folding like a cheap tent. But I think there's this notion on the left, uh, online, big YouTube hosts, that we just need to run scorched earth everywhere. Uh, Rant against the Democratic Party, fight the Democratic Party, just breathe out that socialism. And on a national level, I actually think that could work. I think Bernie made a lot of mistakes, but the sad reality is, in a lot of these, like Buffalo, New York, yeah, it's New York, but it's the Rust Belt, so
Right.
it is a blue collar town that they are open to working class issues, but they're also very susceptible to socialism scares and defund the police. And that is what the corrupt current mayor, who did sleep, I don't want to minimize India Walton's, historic upset in the primary, but the
Sure.
truth is he didn't really campaign. He took it for granted. Just like Joe Crowley took AOC 3 years ago for granted. The only difference is Joe Crowley, no profile and courage, had at least the grace to go quietly into the night and become a lobbyist. Here, the mayor wouldn't do that. And this sets a really bad precedent because now we know, if corporate candidates lose in the primary, we're going to have to do 2 primaries. I mean, Byron Brown succeeded in doing it, so why wouldn't name your corporate mayor or corporate senator or corporate governor who's been in office for a while, has name recognition? Why wouldn't they just go ahead and write a write-in campaign or run as an independent because they see Byron Brown did it successfully? So I think the main things that happened were, A, she won in the primary. She did run a good campaign, but he did not campaign. You did not have, I mean, honestly, the real estate developers, the Republicans that ended up flooding the mayor's wallet with money in the general, they basically, because he wasn't campaigning, they didn't get involved in the primary. They basically just said he was going to glide to victory because who is this, activist? So they slept on her and she won. And then they stopped sleeping. They went all in. And you had this mixture. If you look at the polls before the election, crime was one of the number one issues. And Buffalo is a high crime area because it's the 3rd poorest city in the country. So it's that old issue. Well, yeah, it's the 3rd poorest city in the country because the mayor has sold the city to real estate developers, flooded all the money to downtown. I mean, LA, Portland, San Francisco, Chicago, gentrification everywhere. And all that money that's going to beautify downtown and the waterfront has left the rest of the city starving of jobs, of social services, and that. But he really, and the media went with him, was hammering her on the socialism, was hammering her on defund the police, which, Nina Turner, for example, kind of got in trouble with that bowl of shit comment when she wasn't running. Because I could tell you, it was on billboards all over Cleveland when I was there during the election that she called Biden a bowl of shit. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened here. India Walton, as an activist before she ran, was defund the police. She was at the rallies and leading the charge. It's kind of hard to walk that back during the primary. So during the general. So I think really what happened is, Byron Brown, the current mayor's base that probably didn't come out in the primary, came out in the general. Because the mayor didn't come out in the primary, so why would they? And polls showed before the election, 43% of those polled did not vote in the primary. So it shows you that there was an increase in turnout among Brown's base. And the other thing, and this is it's not exclusive to India Walton, and progressives need to figure it out. If you're going to run as a socialist, you better have a way of combating the propaganda about socialism. If you're going to run as a socialist, which frankly, I think you should be using a different term than socialist, and that's about your opponent. I think India Walton, I mean, literally, if you don't know, Ron, and many people don't because the media underscored it, this is one of the most, this is Joe Manchin on steroids. Byron Brown, the mayor of Buffalo, his administration had been investigated, financial fraud, illegal bids that they were handing out. Members of his administration were convicted. It never got to Byron Brown. But India Walton, aside from a few tweets, really wouldn't run on that corruption. She really wouldn't call him corrupt during the debate. She wouldn't run ads that he's corrupt. She wouldn't connect the line between his corruption and basically selling you, the working class, out to grease the wheels of his donors and developers. She wouldn't do that. So it's kind of like if it were me, and I wouldn't be a great politician, but if it were me
neither.
I would have said, yeah, I'm a socialist. We could talk about that later. Let's talk about the important term. He's corrupt. Let's talk about his corruption. So honestly, I think the truth is the most dependable voting bloc in this country, local elections, congressional elections, Senate elections, are 65 and up. They're terrified of the term socialism. There's been a 50-year propaganda war, and elevated in the last 30 years by corporate media that she could be literally, she could be running on, cancer research and helping the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts and like really good things. And they're going to attack her with socialism. The media is all in. Oh yeah. Part of why I like being on the road, you're in it. Like you're listening to the local radio, you're watching the local news. All they were focused on is his attack ads. She's a socialist.
So they were just copying and printing the press releases. That's what they were doing.
So there's no moral victories, but I would say it's not a small thing that she got 41% of the vote. That's not a victory, but it's not nothing in Buffalo, which is the second largest city in New York, Buffalo. Number two, I think India Walton, she did make some mistakes. Was it definitive? I don't know. She had labor support during the primary, but then she told business leaders that she was open to charter schools. So the
Mm.
teacher federation moonwalked away from
Yeah,
supporting
they
her.
she lost that endorsement, right? Wasn't that
Right, right.
okay?
Then she sent out literature, campaign stuff without that from non-union shops, which is like a no-no. 17 points. I don't think you could say that's determinative, but I do think at the end of the day, whether it's Nita Turner, whether it's India Walton, you gotta know that if you're gonna run scorched earth against the Democratic Party before you are elected, before you're running, meaning Nina Turner with those comments, you better have a way of reacting where they're not going to make the whole campaign about you being a disloyal Democrat. And in India Walton's case, I think you got to go all the way. I mean, this
Right.
particular race, and we're going to talk about this. This is my problem all along with the progressive strategy for the infrastructure deal versus the broader thing. There were so many opportunities to just literally go on a crusade against Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, and they refused to do it. And I said
Mhm.
that. Ron, and I'd like to know what you think. When I interviewed Ro Khanna a couple weeks ago, at that point, they were kind of holding the line. We're not going to vote for the infrastructure deal without this broader 3.5 trillion. And I asked them, why don't you go to West Virginia? Like a very simple question.
Mhm.
Why don't you guys go to West Virginia and hold a massive rally and shame this man? I mean, he's literally
Well, I
in,
mean, his own constituents are confronting him.
right,
His own
right.
constituents are confronting him in West Virginia. I mean, literally, I mean, how poetically disturbing was all that? He's literally getting off of his yacht or out of his what's that nice car he has? I forget the brand, but he has that really nice car, and people are confronting him. The peasants are confronting the ruling class.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, what
Oh, he
did
had
Ro
the
Khanna
Maserati.
say?
The Maserati.
Maserati, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So what did
But
Ro Khanna say?
well, he said, I don't know if that would make a big difference. And I said, well,
Mm,
to me, whatever, this inside baseball thing. And I know the whole, progressives will say, well, it's more than just Manchin and Cinema. Like they were cover for the other Democrats that really didn't want this either. That's fine.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, they put forth Manchin and Cinema as the two obstructionists. So those are who you go after. And if you get them to fold and others want to come out after that, you do the same thing. But I said to Ro Khanna, what I don't understand is Joe Manchin has experienced zero pressure on him. Zero. Kirsten Cinema, zero pressure. The media occasionally might have reported them unfavorably. They barely reported on the real time play by play fundraisers they were doing from Big
mhm,
Pharma. The Intercept broke what I thought was a pretty significant story that Joe Manchin has made like $4.5 million from his coal company as a senator over 10 years. None of the media reported it. So I asked them, why don't you pressure this man? Why don't you go hold a rally? You, Bernie, get the whole gang and point out that this man who's literally blocking not inadequate climate legislation, because I don't even think the 3.5 trillion was enough.
no,
He's blocking it while making millions on coal. Why aren't you going to Arizona and pointing out that this senator ran on lowering prescription drugs 5 minutes ago? She ran like 3 years ago on lowering prescription drugs. Like, these aren't personal attacks. This is follow the money. Why don't you say you think you're not going to get people to that rally? Bernie Sanders won every county in West Virginia. Bernie, the Latinos in Arizona love Bernie. And his answer to me was, well, I don't know if Manchin would really care that much about that. I'm like, well, you don't know because you've never tried it. And I don't know, not you're a comedian, so you know psychology a little because you comedians are very adept. I think Joe Manchin is just a human. I think he can be susceptible to being shamed, particularly if 7 to 10,000 people roll up deep at a rally calling him corrupt in West Virginia, pointing out his donations. By the way, not one of them pointed out that Joe Manchin, Ron, while he's waxing poetic about entitlement society, his daughter jacked up the prices of EpiPens as
oh,
as the
jeez.
CEO of a pharmaceutical company.
Wow.
If it was me, I'd be in jail. If it were you, you'd be in the Hague. And she got off scot free. there was also, I've been to West Virginia. It's an open secret that Joe Manchin basically paid the university to give her a degree. She didn't even finish school. So
Wow.
I
I
think
didn't
there
know
are
that.
so many, basically, what you have here, and, I don't know if you agree or disagree. You have people that, as activists, might have been nodding their heads watching us right now. Like AOC as an activist might have been listening to what I'm saying and what you're saying and being like, yeah, absolutely. But Rashida Tlaib too. But then they kind of get in there, and I don't think it's as clear. They're not like corrupt per se, but they kind of get seduced by this. Well, we need to build relationships with our colleagues, and we gotta negotiate and be diplomatic
They
to
play
get
it the
to get
company
ahead.
way.
Right.
They play it
Exactly.
the company way during a time where it's we cannot have you playing it the company way because we elected you to really kind of throw a wrench in the system. That's what you were elected to do. And it's just not happening. And it always seems to go the one way. We always see it's not like we're winning some and losing some. We always seem to just lose time and time again. Oh, we just lost yet again. We just lost yet again. We just lost. Okay, 6 squad members voted the way they were supposed to, but no one else in the Progressive Caucus was there. Why? What does it mean to be? I think the Progressive Caucus just means you have progressive insurance. I think that's the only qualifier. So, I mean, yeah, I'm with you. We see this time and time again. And it's possible for two things to be true at the same time. Truth number one, Joe Manchin is completely terrible. Absolutely. Kristen Sinema, they are awful beyond comprehension. But truth number two, it ain't just the two of them. There is a systemic thing going on here. So yeah, I mean, and I think that I have not seen your interview with Rokana, so I don't want to like talk too much about that, but just because I haven't seen it. But that's a very weak answer, in my opinion. If he just said, "Well, I don't think Joe Manchin would care." I mean, people are showing up and they're getting in his face. And I showed that clip on Twitter. I'm sure you did as well. And because actually, I think I might have seen it being tweeted out from Status Coup first, actually. But I mean, I think that's great. And I applauded the activists who were there, the Honor Earth folks, the Sunrise Movement folks, all the people who were there. And I said, more of this.
Well, also, what's amazing, Colin, I just sent this to you. So this is just kind of a accumulation, right? GOP billionaire Ken Langan tells CNBC he will hold a fundraiser for Joe Manchin. Ken Langan is a massive billionaire. I think he owns hospitals. Yeah, the Langan Centers in New York. But just filthy rich, given to Mitt Romney, big Republican guy, holding a big fundraiser for Joe Manchin. Quote, I'm
Side
going to have.
note, it's so appropriate that he's wearing a mask right now that kinda makes him look like a stormtrooper.
Exactly.
So appropriate.
And he says, I'm going to have one of the biggest fundraisers I've ever had for him. He's special. So why I bring that up, and this is today, like that just came out. So clearly there's a cause and effect here. This man has shrink this down to basically the transformational deal is like, hey, you get a VIP coupon to show up to Best Buy an hour before Black Friday starts. That's really what this is going to be whittled down to. You get in
Mhm.
line an hour before everybody else. But that's my attempt at comedy, by the way. It's not as good as yours. But
No, no, no. Well, I'm kinda concerned well, finish your point first, and then we'll talk more about the bill as a
but
whole.
my whole point was part of it also is, and I see this in local elections I cover. Part of it also is these progressives, they're terrible with the media. And so was Bernie. So was Bernie. So if you're Pramila Jayapal, and Rokana was doing the media circuit throughout all this, and Pramila Jayapal was doing the media circuit, their focus is, to me, seeming not radical to the CNN audience, to the MSNBC audience. Their focus seems to be sounding like a normal Democrat to the CNN
Mhm.
audience. Instead of saying, if I was Rokana in interviews with, I mean, he was on all the shows, the Sunday shows, and CNN, MSNBC during all this, saying, Anderson, with all due respect, why do you guys keep calling him moderate? I mean, I got the poll numbers right here. It's not moderate to be depriving West Virginians of policies that have 80% support. That's not moderate. It's not moderate to literally be removing all of the life or death climate proposals that all of these experts and scientists say we need just to exist. That's not moderate. These are radical positions Anderson. Why don't you put the media on the defense who keep framing Manchin and Sinema as just, oh, yeah, they're moderates. They just hold different beliefs than the progressives.
Right.
Like, you're not going to get the CNN or the MSNBC or the New York Times audience to think differently if you're just going along with the framing that the media continues to put out there that, oh, no, Manchin, he's just has to be this way because he's from a red state. Well, West Virginia, I mean, this is another thing they could have said. West Virginia went for Bernie. Every county went for Bernie Sanders. West Virginia was a Democratic state as of 10 years ago. It only recently became right because the Democratic Party moved right and voters decided, let's just take the real thing, the Republicans.
Absolutely. And West Virginia, going further back than that, has a very, very long working class history. I mean, I grew
Yep.
up around that area. I grew up in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
So yeah, that is a Rust Belt area. That is a working class area. It's where the term redneck originates, because where that term originates was whenever there were violent clashes between the workers and the powers that be who would try to combat them. They wore red scarves around their neck to make sure they didn't harm each other. So I hear you, and I think the theme here is, if you're gonna go scorched earth, you got to just commit to it. Because I mean, even some of the stuff you were talking about earlier with what ended up sinking India Walton, you can also look around and you can see in my hometown of Pittsburgh, again, a couple card carrying DSA members have been winning local seats. A defund the police candidate won a city council seat in Iowa. So there's something to be said for when you do have the right messaging. I even think, staying on the defund the police example, when you can really explain what that actually means to people, I think all of a sudden people become a little more open. When you can explain that defund the police does not mean that police officers aren't going to exist anymore. It doesn't mean that if someone robs you, you have nobody to call. That's not what it means. Nor does it mean that your buddy who's a police officer isn't going to get a salary anymore. What it does mean is all of this excess stuff, this military gear, all this stuff that they don't need. They ain't going to get that anymore. And instead, it's going to go into resources in your community that's going to do better at preventing crime in the first place. All of a sudden, that's going to change some minds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's not all or nothing. Like, I do think,
Sure.
like, for example, Nina Turner, right? I know Jimmy and others thought like, no, she lost because she didn't bash the Democratic Party enough. I was there. I could tell you, no, that wasn't what happened. She lost for a lot of reasons, partially because she had a terrible ground game, which her campaign doesn't like people saying, but they just didn't have a strong ground game. But she also lost because it's a very, very pro-Democratic area. I mean, Cleveland is a vote blue no matter who district. That's just the truth. The congresswoman who they were running to replace, she was winning elections by like 50, 60 points in the primary and more in the general. And it had during presidential elections voted for Hillary overwhelmingly, Biden overwhelmingly. So it was a place that might agree with Nina Turner on the issues, but doesn't hate the Democratic Party. So it goes back to that national first local messaging. For us online, we'd love to hear Nina Turner just rant and rave, against the Democratic Party. If she would have done that there, I could tell you she probably would have lost by 20 to 30 instead of 6. A big reason she lost is they were able just ad after ad after. I couldn't get out of bed without ads hammering Nina Turner. That's
why I think she lost. I think she lost because she just had, and I was surprised to see so many people, and you weren't one of them, but so many people just sort of glossed over the fact that there was literal GOP money going into attacking her.
India Walton too. India Walton too.
Oh, really?
Republicans.
I'm not surprised. So it's like there is this. We love to hear bipartisanship, right? Well, guess what? There is a bipartisan effort to crush any progressive movement whatsoever. It's a bipartisan effort. To me, that screams so much louder than mistakes that the candidate themselves made. That doesn't mean like, I'm sure I don't agree with everything Nina Turner did. I'm sure I don't know all the ins and outs of everything India Walton did, but I'm sure I'd have some disagreements there too. But what screams so much louder to me is just like there is this all-out establishment assault on any type of progressive candidate. And I think the India Walton thing, I mean, my first reaction to that was I was like, the blue no matter who camp, we already weren't listening to you, or at least I sure as hell wasn't. But nobody should ever listen to you again because I mean you have just made it loud and clear. Those rules don't apply. You're talking
Oh,
out
I
of your
think they're in
ass
big
when you
trouble.
virtue signal like that way. You hate you hate lefties more than anything, and you don't stick by your blue no matter who principles, or you would have voted for India Walton.
Well, and by the way, we got 350 people watching. Smash that like button.
What up, everybody?
Right under the video. Go subscribe. Ron Placone on YouTube. He's a great fella, funny fella, and wise political mind. But to me, I think what you're saying is really important because let's fast forward here. I don't know, 2024, which whoever the progressive candidate is that
That's
they rig,
now, Jordan.
right? Whoever they rig it against, whether it's Nina running on the progressive line, whether it's name your progressive, even if they could do well, because I think a lot of progressives are deflated right now and might not even go out and necessarily vote for the progressive candidate in a Democratic primary. But putting that aside, let's say it's Pete, because that's who they want. Kamala, I mean, I don't think at this point, I don't know if Biden is going to
Well,
make it.
there was that article today kind of like tried to cancel that idea. I forget what outlet put it out, but they basically were like, at her 28% approval rating, Kamala Harris will not be able. They're already
Whoever it,
preemptively saying, like, yeah, it's probably not going to be you. We
yeah,
tried. We
if
really
it's
tried. We shoved you down the public's throat so many freaking times, and then we shoved you down their throat again as the VP candidate. We really tried, but
yeah,
it's just every time you speak, nobody wants to listen to you.
I mean, whatever it is, her, Pete, the reincarnated dead body of Joe Lieberman, even though he's alive. Um, well, I don't know. I don't really know if people are going to be listening so much. Like, all right, time for immaturity is over. Fall in line, or we're going to get President Ron DeSantis. I just don't know if people are going to care anymore because I think people have just become so fed up and numb to this bullshit. It's almost like that same record spinning, that same old record spinning, or whatever the phrase is, that they're going to say, yeah, well, you kind of screwed India Walton and you screwed Nina Turner and you screwed Bernie 17 times. These progressives made
And
mistakes
what did you
too.
do for us while you held power? When you had
Right.
the White House, the Senate, the House, and this bleeds into some of the other stuff we're talking about. What did you do with it?
Right.
And so far, that answer has been a whole lot of nothing. And in fact, you've made things a little bit worse in some cases. And
Right.
I'm curious I mean, Jordan, I wouldn't be shocked. And I'm not going to like go on the record as making this a prediction, but now they're kind of, oh, let's look at the CBO score about the spending and this and that. And I think that has signaled to us that ideally they want to do absolutely freaking nothing. And I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. I wouldn't be shocked if
My
we got nothing.
I'll predict. I think they're going to do something. I don't even think the top line number matters anymore because they could do very big accounting tricks to
It's
make it
down to $40, I think.
right.
I think it's
But
$40.
but even at the 1.75, there's a lot of accounting tricks and things like that. Ultimately, I think what they're going to do, they're going to have in there something that looks like paid family leave, even though if you actually look underneath the hood, that paid family leave, it's going through private insurance instead of just the government footing the bill. So they'll have paid family leave.
Yeah.
Pelosi and
By
them will
paid family leave, we mean your boss gives you a cupcake. It comes out of
right.
your paycheck, but it's a tasty cupcake.
Right. They'll frame it as transformational, which Pramila Jayapal is trying to sell right now in her tweets about, this is transformation. They'll have the universal pre-K, which is also going to be means tested and 6 years. Pre-K is one of the only things that is good in there because I don't think that's something necessary that could be ripped away by Republicans. When you get structural change like that, Medicare, Social Security, things like that, it's not. I mean, they've tried to do with Obamacare, which Obamacare was terrible. It's hard once you pass something that's structural, popular to rip it away, even though they've tried. Other than that, it's just going to be a mishmash of kind of check the box things that have provisions in all of them that aren't really direct, are overly bureaucratic. From the affordable housing, they made it seem like that's so big, $150 billion. Ron, I've traveled across the country, $150 billion it's a fucking half a Band-Aid to a gaping gunshot wound, which is
Sure.
gentrification.
Oh,
That's not enough
absolutely.
money for affordable housing. The other things that they say will be in there, the climate provisions, which is the big stuff that Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal are trying to feed to progressives. Well, you got to look underneath the hood. You can't just look at $550 billion. The biggest provision, with the one that had teeth in it, that Manchin blocked, which again, why didn't you go to West Virginia and shame this man? Why didn't you go to West Virginia and call this man corrupt? Why didn't you point out his donors? Why didn't you point out his daughter? Was the main provision was that utilities had to shift to renewables by 4% a year or something like that. And there would be incentives for them to do it, but had to every year shift further and further to renewables by 4%, I think it was, or get fined. So actual teeth, he blocked that. Then what he did, then he's trying to get subsidies. Get this, and you said you're from around that area in West Virginia, for carbon capture, to basically retrofit plants with carbon capture equipment, or however that works, which is the most expensive thing you could do. Carbon capture, instead of shifting to renewable wind, carbon capture is insanely expensive. So instead of actually shifting away from things that will emit carbon, Manchin and this bill would pour, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars of money to retrofit coal plants with carbon capture. I mean, it's absurd. And the other thing is, most of the money for the transformational climate is just neoliberal tax incentives.
Right.
I mean, we don't have time for this shit. Tax incentives. I mean, you're in you're in LA. I don't need to explain it. So again, the numbers will be deceiving. And Jayapal and Ro Khanna, I don't know if they actually believe that this is transformational. And of course, somebody in the chat just said the worst cyanide pill in all this is the salt tax, which people fall asleep. All that means state and local tax deduction. All that means is it's literally giving hundreds of millions of dollars in tax cuts to upper middle class people making over
Yeah,
$500,000
it's
a
even
year.
bigger. It's even bigger than what Trump did, isn't it?
Yep.
Like it's
Yep.
even bigger. I mean, that's unreal. And which, by the way, small quick correction. I'm from Pittsburgh, not West
Oh, sorry.
Virginia. I got to make the correct. It is hockey season, so I got to make that correction. But yeah, it's, and just the fact that they decoupled it after promising, because that, a lot of people, they don't realize that it's like the spending bill is its own thing, and then the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which by bipartisan they mean, hey, Sinema and Manchin weighed in on this thing. That was its own separate thing that had a lot of poison pills. I mean, there's something there. You want to talk about some of the stuff they're means testing. Their means testing, and by the way, this is gonna, as an independent journalist, this is something that's gonna turn on your radar. As an independent performer, this is turning on mine too. Their means testing a per mileage toll on all drivers, where it's like they're going to privatize our roads. They're going to have a per mileage fee for all the drivers out there. I mean, there's a lot of poison pills in that that bipartisan bill, where it's like, well, at least it'll accompany some spending that's a drop in the bucket. Hopefully, maybe. Well, it's not. It's a fraction of a drop of a drop of a drop, with all kinds of red tape and provisions, as you pointed out, and we decoupled them after promising not to. And nobody's even mentioning that. Like, no one's even, I mean, I don't, if we had a true progressive caucus, if that was a real thing and all 100 members actually were that way, they would have just walked out. They would have been like, no, this is not what we agreed on.
But also, again, I don't want to. And I want to get into, by the way, something about the infrastructure deal. So I'll get into that, because this infrastructure deal that Biden's going around, transformational, this and that, literally just selling the whole goddamn country to private vultures. It's a disaster, which I want to get into. But it kind of goes back to, give credit, whatever, AOC, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, I forget the other two, the 6 that voted no. Okay. But yeah, you could have done so much more before then. And again, it goes back to, you have to realize you're not negotiating with people who are actually operating in good faith. And that includes Biden, and that includes Pelosi, and that includes Schumer. just look at actions. If Biden passionately wanted even a quarter of the things in this bill, he would be publicly using the power and bully pulpit of the presidency to pressure Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, not these private White House meetings. Biden, and I don't think the squad really gets this, he's an old fossil that only cares about headlines of a bipartisan deal. It doesn't matter if it's for a fucking Baby Ruth chocolate bar. As long as there's a bipartisan deal that comes together, that's what he cares about. So he wasn't really passionately for any of these things. Nancy Pelosi, she wanted stuff to shore up Obamacare for her legacy, they were saying. Schumer, trying to avoid a primary next year, particularly from AOC. So the assurances they were giving you, you could never trust that, but they ended up trusting it. And what happened? Pelosi and Biden, who their position in the beginning that they claimed was these two have to go together, started moving backwards from it because that was never really their true position. They were just trying to placate the progressives. So I guess what I'm saying is progressives, they had the opportunity in ample media interviews. AOC's got a gazillion Twitter followers. Bernie still has an army. A lot of them might be pissed at him. I think they could be activated again if you lead and if you show you're fighting. They could have gone on offense and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Joe Biden was elected president, and this is what he says he wants. This isn't some radical socialist takeover. This is Joe Biden's bill.
Yeah,
and
pin
these
it
two,
back on him.
right? And these two, excuse me, CNN, this is moderate because go poll. Look at the polls. Why aren't you informing your audience? All of these things have overwhelming popularity among everyone, including Republicans. This isn't like the critical race theory issue.
Well, and they never bring up their base either, which is also very frustrating. They never bring up like, hey, our base is not going to tolerate this. This is what our base demands, and this is what most American people demand because they want a planet for their freaking children, for crying out loud.
Right.
And yeah, I'm with it. I mean, I got so annoyed, and again, you know, we live in a post-nuance society. So I tweeted about this and some people got mad at me. They're like, Rod, are you saying you would prefer that the squad didn't vote? And they're like, no, of course I'm glad they voted no. But what I was annoyed by was people who were just pom-poms in the air cheering this on like it was a victory. Like, oh, they finally did the absolute bare minimum. None of the progressive caucus followed them, and we still lost. But hey, my favorite political action figure did what I wanted. So pat on the back today. Like, no, this isn't a victory. And as a lefty in the United States, who has been a lefty most of my life, as long as I've been awake politically, and I have done nothing but lose that entire time. And I realize that I'm part of a long losing tradition of about 100 freaking years. I am so damn tired of polishing the turd that is a loss. And I'm so tired of us just losing time and time again. Well, they all voted the right way, but there were other people that didn't. And so this bad. Oh, a couple of them voted present. So this horrible thing came through. I get at this point that we have a corporate coup for a government, and change is going to happen from the bottom up. And it's going to happen from us being a movement that can't be ignored. Now, unfortunately, we've really struggled with this for 100 freaking years because we are still politically the smallest group in the country. We're just not as small as we thought we were. That's the little bit of good news. There's more of us than we realize, but we only found that out 5 years ago. So we're still wandering around going, hey, we have a 100-year losing streak. There's a little bit more of us than we thought we had. What the heck do we do now?
Well, I also think at the end of the day, because everybody could have their own opinion, they're like assholes. Negative campaigning works, whether electorally or whether just through the normal negotiations of Congress. A lot of people don't remember, you know, I said Bernie was weak during both campaigns. There was a point at the end of his campaign, he was actually closing the gap among older voters. Why? Because David Sirota for the campaign was like a giant fucking henchman going after Joe Biden on Social Security. And Bernie Sanders was running ads against Joe Biden on trying to privatize Social Security. So they were going after him like aggressively. They weren't calling him corrupt. I wish they would, but they were going after him on an issue that an important demographic cared about, older voters, and older voters were starting to shift towards Bernie away from Biden. This was happening during the end of the campaign. So when people say the squad, yeah, kudos, they voted no. I don't think they did enough. You want to know why? Because when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a guest on CBS Face the Nation or the Sunday Show, and you got big audiences, and whatever you say could become a news cycle in itself after the fact, and you take that opportunity to be very diplomatic and talk like a good Democrat and say, yeah, we're just it's negotiations, is that no, call them. If you don't want to call them corrupt, say, well, I would like you guys to bring Joe Manchin on and ask, how are you supposed to negotiate in good faith when you are making millions of dollars from coal? That would be a news story. The media would cover that. It would create other news cycles. That makes Joe Manchin have to defend himself. Sure, people would say, well, Jordan, the media would attack progressives if they do that. Are they not attacking them regardless? I mean, give
no
me a
kidding.
break.
It's like
Give
they
me a
hate you
break.
no matter what. You might as well just embrace it and try to make your base stronger. Like
Right.
you're not going to be at their cool kids table no matter what.
Because you know what happens, Ron, if AOC did that, if Ro Khanna, who told me it wouldn't have made a difference, goes to West Virginia, if Bernie holds rallies, Bernie wrote an op-ed in a West Virginia paper. Okay, that's a start. Why wouldn't you hold a rally pointing out, hey, West Virginia, Joe Manchin says, you guys don't want this. Well, I got the numbers here. West Virginia is the second poorest state in the country. Do you want paid family leave? Do you want clean energy jobs? Do you want to save the planet and get off coal? You'd have massive crowds. Media would cover it, and it becomes a cycle from there of pressuring Joe Manchin. They were never on defense. Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, none of these people are ever on defense. And if the progressives are not going to make a fundamental choice, do we want to play this long game where we're just going to try and build relationships with our colleagues here in Congress and the Senate and bring them over to our side? Or AOC is the one that said it, bring the ruckus to the Democratic Party. Well, that ruckus is nowhere to be found. And because of that, frankly, I think, Ron, where we're sitting right now, in 3 years, we're going to look back and said, this is what created Trump 2.0, or this is what created This is what created President DeSantis. Because everybody has their hot take about like why McAuliffe lost in Virginia, or why the New Jersey governor's race was so close and all this stuff. But overall, in general, when people are desperate economically and people are suffering economically and people's standard of living is half of what it was 10, 20 years ago, yeah, they're going to be more open to phony populists, culture wars, finding groups to blame, and they're not really going to be so captivated by the message of, hey, we put shots in your arm and gave you a coupon to Denny's.
Well, and they're going to respond to strength. I mean, there's a
Yes.
reason, hey, I agree with Trump on nothing. But in 2016, when he was just knocking down those GOP candidates like they were frickin' bowling pins, people responded to that. And I mean, hell, even I laughed. I mean, it was pretty funny. Like, and so people respond to that. People don't respond to, and that's why Trump lost in 2020, because in 2020 he didn't have that bravado anymore because he completely mishandled the pandemic in every way freaking imaginable. So he tried to just scare America about quote unquote socialism, which I mean, that's the idea of painting Joe Biden as a socialist is so comically laughable. The only Marx he's ever even heard of is Groucho. But Trump tried that. The American people didn't buy it. They're like, you kidding? Come on. We're not this gullible. And you mishandled freaking everything. So he ended up losing. So now you have this wishy-washy. We have power. We're not doing anything whatsoever. It's setting the stage for a bloodbath in the midterms. And yeah, I don't see. I'd be surprised if Democrats kept the White House in 24, because
Right.
I don't think it's going to be Trump. I don't think Trump wants to run again, but I think it'll likely be DeSantis, and I think that guy could win.
I agree. I totally agree with you, sadly. And frankly,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
he's
scary
more
thought,
dangerous.
but
I think he's more dangerous than Trump. I think he's more competent than Trump in getting a lot of terrible things through. I think he's got a bit of a God complex, which matches Trump's. But I think he's younger, more competent, and a little bit more deranged, frankly.
he's way more
So,
competent. I mean, he's spinning what's going on in his state as a positive.
right.
And it's I mean, it's not working with a lot of the country, but it's definitely working with some, and it's working
Right.
with enough that if he goes up against some blank suit, which they're gonna try to make sure he goes up against a blank suit, he'll probably win.
Yeah. I wanted to read this part of a just grotesque New York Times editorial board op ed. The headline: Democrats deny political reality at their own peril. If you have that, Colin. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I don't have the stomach for it. But this part was particularly nauseating. Virginia, responding to the Virginia elections, Virginia is a cross section of suburbs, education levels, and racial diversity that is a mirror of what a winning coalition driven Democratic Party should be. Uh, Democrats lost there, even with a longtime moderate as their candidate for governor, because the party has become distracted from crucial issues like the economy, inflation, ending the coronavirus pandemic, and restoring normalcy in schools, and isn't offering moderate unifying solutions to them. So the problem is they're offering too much, Ron. They're not offering moderate, unifying solutions. Republicans now have a playbook for future elections based on the way their nominee for governor, blah, blah, blah. And if you move down a little later, Colin, Bill Clinton's mantra from 1992 of "it's the economy, stupid" is rarely out of vogue, and it certainly isn't now. But Democrats looking left on so many priorities and so much messaging have lost sight of what can unite the largest number of Americans. Oh my
Oh
God.
my god.
A national Democratic Party that talks up progressive policies at the expense of bipartisan ideas and that dwells on Donald Trump at the expense of forward looking ideas is at risk of becoming a marginal Democratic Party. Uh, your thoughts on that before I rant?
I mean, first of all, I'm curious how I mean, based on their thesis here, how did they explain New Jersey? Because that guy has actually been moving left a little bit. I mean, not as much as someone like me would like, but comparatively speaking, compared to McAuliffe, that guy's definitely been moving left compared to him, and that guy won.
Right.
And this guy didn't. In a state where Biden won by like what? Biden won handily. Biden won by like 10 or something like that
In Virginia, yeah. 10.
in Virginia. And this guy loses. And all this guy did, he literally campaigned against Donald Trump. That was his entire thing. He was campaigning against a guy he wasn't running against. You don't like Trump? Neither do I. What else do you got?
Right.
He had nothing else. He was campaigning against a guy he wasn't running against. He had the Lincoln Project do these stupid gestural stunts for him that inspired nobody. The Lincoln Project is just they're just Republicans who are like, we think that Trump talks mean, which honestly, we should be really, really suspicious of that because basically the whole like never Trump Republican, you're basically saying I'm fine with a neo-fascist party, which is what Republicans are. And Trump has no policies that are different from the GOP. Trump and the GOP are the same thing. Trump just didn't have subtlety. I'm sure he still doesn't. He doesn't have subtlety. So you're basically saying I like the policies, but a spoonful of sugar helps the fascism go down. Give me a George W. Bush that seems nice to get a beer with, and I'm happy because it's making me rich. Those people, I mean, in some ways, they're even worse. At least with a Trump, like you're not getting any subtlety. So like, yeah, this guy's a total scumbag. They're like, we want to just put a nice little mask on the scum.
Right. Well, what's amazing to me is that New York Times editorial that basically, had a boner for moving the Democratic Party moving right. They talked about Bill Clinton and it's the economy. That it's the economy, stupid, and Democrats ignored the economy. Well, they have it right, but for reason they have it right, but in the opposite way. Democrats did ignore the economy, and you know what is the economy? The $15 minimum wage,
Yeah,
which should be the $25 minimum wage, by the way.
right.
So Democrats, it's the only actual thing Joe Biden ran on, other than restoring the soul of the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He ran on a $15 minimum wage immediately, right out of the gate. Moonwalked away from that. I don't know. That's not too inspiring to people in Virginia, people in New Jersey. I mean, some of these states have it already, even though it's being phased in. We'll start at $9.50, then go up to 11. But they ran on a $15 minimum wage, didn't follow through with it. Ran on $2,000 checks, didn't follow through on it. Biden ran on a public option, didn't follow through on it. Biden ran, I mean, the list goes on and on and on economic things, didn't follow through on it. So, yeah, I mean, the New York Times is half right. They weren't following through on the economic needs, because the economic needs that they could follow through on, that would actually be popular, galvanize their base to come out, their donors don't want those things. So there's a conflict of interest here. The donors don't want, they don't want minimum wage increase, period. They don't want any shift in healthcare, more towards the public, away from the private. Routine checks going out. No, we can't open that Pandora's box. So the New York Times, again, it's this propaganda that the American people's main want is bipartisanship and unity. It's been this Chamber of Commerce bullshit message as long as you and I have been alive, that nobody actually thinks.
Thinks that.
I don't know many people whose biggest problem while they're driving Uber, on top of their other job, no offense to people working 3 jobs, is, they're just not getting along in Washington. They're not doing enough stuff together.
I'm worried about them. I sent them a fruit basket. I'm really concerned.
I mean, God, it's absurd. It's insulting. But you want to know something? From that New York Times op-ed to CNN, and CNN's framing and MSNBC's framing this whole time throughout these whole negotiations was, this looks dysfunctional. And don't the Democrats risk it looking like they can't govern? Well, no, they risk like they won't govern. Not that they can't, that they won't. Because the president, who promised compromise, $15, compromise position, public option, compromise position. All these things are not even inspirational, bold things. They can't govern because they won't go to the mat for it, because their donors won't allow it. So it is this dog and pony show.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about not governing. We are getting through a global pandemic, and this country had the largest upward transfer of wealth, maybe in history during it. We had 1 million less people in social services during a global pandemic. The idea of universal healthcare wasn't even uttered. You know who proved that they can't govern? The entire United States government. They prove that the system is even worse than folks like you and I realize. It's absolutely, it's just a total scam. We are like, if a hidden transaction fee was a country, that's what the United States would be. That's literally just what we are. And if you had to just sum up in a sentence, why did Virginia go down the way it was? This is nothing we don't already know. If you had to sum it up in one sentence, the Democrats' first priority is not winning. Their first priority, like you hinted to, make the donors happy. Make sure the donors are happy, so we can actually get behind things people actually want. You make sure the donors are happy. If you can beat a Republican or two every now and again, great. If not, well, the gravy train keeps rolling as long as we keep those donors happy. And that's what bipartisanship really is. It really is an effort between these two Wall Street approved parties, Wall Street Team R and Wall Street Team D, to keep the gravy train rolling and keep the donors happy.
Absolutely. I want to read, if you can stomach one more, Ron. This is also from the New York Times. They interviewed Sean Patrick Maloney, who's the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, which is another corrupt body.
Another scam. You have to give money to these horrible people.
Right. So give
money they're going to send you to all the AM radio stations in the country, kid. Some of them have 10 watts. You're going to be a star. That'll be $100,000, please. Oh, you don't have that in your campaign? You don't get democracy.
And by the way, the DCCC is the Democratic Congressional Change Committee, and they were the ones that were like, no, consultants or campaign, political companies, you can't consult or work for progressives.
We have our in-house people.
Right. You can't work for progressives. You can't work for progressives who are primarying incumbents. It's just the patronage scheme. Anyway, he was interviewed by the New York Times, and his message was free Joe Biden. That's what's going. That's the problem here. So here's the question.
From the nursing home lunch, where are we freeing him from?
We'll see. So the New York Times said to him, there are 50 Democratic held House seats in congressional districts that President Biden won by less than he carried Virginia. Now that a Republican, Glenn Youngkin, has won the Virginia governor's race, is it time for Democrats to make a radical readjustments to save themselves next year? So Maloney, the head of the DCCC, says the results in Virginia and elsewhere ought to be a wake-up call that we're not getting the job done on messaging. It starts with the president. The number one thing is to grow the economy and end the pandemic. But close behind that is telling people what you've done. I think it's a fair criticism to say we haven't done enough of that. And I think the White House needs to do more. I don't think the president has been served well in this regard. It needs to happen right away. The president needs to get himself out there all around the country and do events in local media markets to punch through these key messages. I think the White House should do 25 presidential events in the next couple months just on infrastructure. And we should do 1,000 congressional events alongside those presidential events. My message is free Joe Biden. So where do you start with that? So corn pop, more of that. I've heard this before. I heard this after 2016 too, that the problem was messaging, not the policies. It was just the messaging. And Obamacare, the problem was messaging. We didn't tell people how great it was. So did they err on them? Because when they're saying we haven't told people what they do, well, I don't know, Ron. As far as I know, what they've done, they gave a $1,400 check. They gave a temporary 1-year child tax credit, which has been billed as transformational and cutting childhood poverty in half. So that's kind of like telling the homeless guy, hey, here's an Airbnb for a year. After that, good luck. We're not going to do anything to help you get back on your feet other than giving you this Airbnb. We're not going to try and help you with anything else. And forget a year. Let's just say, the better analogy is, hey, here's shelter for a week, right? So what have they done other than, better distribution with the vaccines, the $1,400 check, the child tax credit? I mean, better than Trump, but not exactly anything that would galvanize the troops to get out there for you.
I feel like op-eds like that one, and yeah, we've seen this theme get recycled and recycled over and over again. They're just subtle ways to sort of put it all on the voters.
Yes.
And to be, it kind of is just gaslighting 101. Like, you don't get how much he wants to help you. I know you feel like he's doing nothing because he is, but really, you just don't understand how powerful this stuff is. If we got Joe out there, he could talk to you and he could tell you how, and then it pans over to Joe Biden and he's freaking sleeping in a chair. They're like, he could tell you how powerful this stuff is. You just got to listen to him. The policies are there. No, they're freaking not. They're not.
Yeah. And you want to know something? You know what you wouldn't have to get out there and explain? Because they would just get it. Medicare for all.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Wouldn't have to really sell it because, hey, I could just go to the doctor and that's it. It's completely asinine and it's insulting. And frankly, if that guy's political acumen is what we need is Joe Biden speaking more and Joe Biden making more public appearances. And I'm not even being funny. I'm just saying, how it is. And Joe Biden messaging what we've done. And speaking of that infrastructure bill, okay, everybody's been caught up in this food fight where the progressives are folding this and that, and rightly so. I think we've already talked about they played this so poorly. If you actually look into this infrastructure deal, Colin, if you have the Mother Jones piece, there's what's going on here. It's very similar to the term gentrification. The term is kind of sleepy, so people just don't really get it. Maybe they're not interested. What is going on in this infrastructure bill is transformational in a horrible way. It's called asset recycling. There hasn't been that much discussion about it. But essentially, this infrastructure deal, how they're paying for it, is essentially selling public waterways, public sewer systems, public roads, selling it from local government control, municipality control, and leasing it or selling it completely to private corporations and taking that money that from the sale to those private corporations to then fund new infrastructure. So this is
Yeah,
I
I'm
would
gonna go out on a limb here, Jordan, and I'm gonna say that you have some experience and could tell a lot of people why that's a bad idea.
Yes.
Just a
Well, if you
hunch.
want an example of the effects of trying to privatize water and other things,
Yeah.
I give you the poisoned people of Flint, Michigan, who still don't have clean water nearly 8 years later. And
Yeah,
Colin,
thanks for keeping that alive, by the way, man. I mean,
well, somebody's got to.
y'all are one of the few. I mean, a lot of people are just sort of not talking about that anymore. That hey, water was privatized. There are people in the United States who literally don't have access to clean water. And yeah, status quo. I mean, kudos to you guys. You guys are one of the few keeping that alive.
Literally behind the scenes, Ron. I won't get into such details, but I'm working on a follow up Flint piece because I'm just a stubborn motherfucker, and I'm going to keep going until there's some change here. And I made a pitch today to an outlet to try and do it with them, and I literally have to write in the email to them why this is still important 8 years later, because I know to most outlets it's not. I know to most outlets they just long abandoned this story, so you really have to explain it like it's to a first grader
Mm.
why this is still important. So it's really sad, but yeah, no,
Well,
Flint.
didn't Michael Moore showed you some love, didn't he? Didn't you were on his
Yes.
podcast? Yeah. I mean, which is awesome. I mean, I'm glad
Well,
he
it,
did.
it took 5 years of courtship meeting, me reaching out to
Really?
Michael, me reaching out to Michael Moore to get him to cover it. But hey, better late than never. So yeah,
Totally, man.
Michael Moore's had me on twice. It's been frustrating because Jen and I have broken in the last year and a half 3 heavy duty Flint stories showing bribery, extortion, destruction of physical evidence, tampering with evidence, and literally we couldn't get Michigan media to cover it or the national media. And the only media that would do it was The Intercept, who gets a lot of shit, but credit to them that they did it with us and gave us the platform to do it. The
Mhm.
Detroit Metro Times, which is an alternative outlet, independent in Detroit. But
The Free Press never did anything with
oh,
y'all?
you want to hear, Ron? You never heard this story? Maybe the
I
people watching
no.
got 400 something people. So literally during a pandemic, as a compromise with my wife, I drove to Michigan so I wouldn't have to fly. It was a
Mhm.
long drive. I did it by myself because Jen was obviously sick with long haul COVID. And I didn't only drive there to meet with this editor, but while I was there, I met with a bigwig editor, the head of investigations for the Detroit Free Press. So we meet in a parking lot. It's fucking freezing. We're meeting outside, so we didn't have to go inside. I mean, this was when there's like 300,000 cases a day, 3,000 people are dying a day. So we met in a parking lot outside. His window's open, my window's open. I handed him on a silver platter the story, like and documents. These documents were from the criminal investigation.
I
Uh,
did see this actually. I mean, please continue, but yeah, no, I did actually see this now that I just forgot
yeah,
about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
And he says to me, "Yeah, we really regret not doing more on Flint." And I said, "Okay, well, good. I'm glad.
Sometimes we just don't get 40 minutes down the road, you know?
Right,
If
right, right.
if there's traffic.
I from New York have been to Flint 18 times. You guys 45 minutes down the road. I'm glad you regret it. Anyway, but he says to me, "Well, you got a lot of great stuff here, but it's kind of anecdotal. The stuff he was talking about. I've got the logs of the former governor Rick Snyder's phone calls.
All this talking to people who don't have clean water, very anecdotal,
Right.
talking to them and getting their
And
stories.
I said to him, I don't know what you mean. Like, I literally have documents for the criminal investigation with prosecutors in writing calling this a cover up, saying that Snyder, on all these calls with his chief of staff and the head of the health department, were covering up the Legionnaire's disease, the bacterial disease that killed a lot of people there. That's their words. It's in writing. I mean, I don't know. I didn't go to journalism school, but that's kind of like smoking gun kind of shit. And I'm like, when did journalists become criminal prosecutors that have to convict beyond a reasonable doubt? Because you're talking about this is all what did he say? This is all I forget the term, but not beyond a reasonable doubt. I said, well, I mean, there's a lot of
That's why
smoke
you
here.
cover it in real time.
Right. There's a
You
lot of smoke
report on
here.
what's happening.
Right. There's a lot of smoke here. We got documents from the criminal investigation where they're pointing to this as a smoking gun. We had other things too. And he says to me, okay, well, you do have a lot of good stuff here, blah, 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 blah. I'll go back to my boss. 3 days later, they passed on the story. Then they wouldn't even, when I broke it for The Intercept, they wouldn't even cover it. Then months later, I go back to them and say, hey, I have documents and phone records showing that officials in the governor's administration deleted their phones right before the launch of the criminal investigation. Just erased their phones. Messages gone, everything. Was that enough for you? Didn't respond. So to answer you, not just with Flint, but a lot of things, the media in this country, and I'm sure you've seen it in LA too, there's something rotten in Denmark. I mean, there is something. This isn't just laziness anymore with the media. This isn't just, oh, well, they're more interested in the food fight rather than substantive things. There are, in my view, orders not to cover certain things for reasons that are beyond me, including
Oh, dude.
financial.
Absolutely. Well, when I was in grad school, I did like a media ecology study because I studied like media policy and communication. And, this was in Pittsburgh. And at the time, the fracking issue, I mean, it still is, but at the time it was a really big thing because that was when they were first trying to like get into the Marcellus Shale big time. This was like 2011 or so. The first gas land had just come out. And I did this like media ecology study on the relationship the oil and gas companies have with the local media. It essentially, they sponsor everything. Like they just like the oil and gas companies just ingrain themselves in the culture in Western Pennsylvania. I mean, even like some of the sports venues, like it used to be the Consol Energy Center. I think it has since been renamed, but that used to be even just where the Penguins play. Range Resources has a sign encouraging you not to litter, which is ironic beyond comprehension. But so they ingrain themselves in the local press and they do it for favorable coverage. That same year, there were over 2,800 violations that went unreported in the region. And that happens every year, and not just in Pennsylvania, all over the place. So yeah, I'm sure, when you follow the money, even in local media, it's like, yeah, they just don't want to touch these things.
And a quick breaking news alert. It just so happens, timing wise, Ron, we're talking about Flint, Michigan. I just got a breaking news alert that the judge has given final approval to the $626 million Flint water settlement, which has been going back and forth in court for years. And that might sound good, $626 million to the victims. Just give you guys specifics, about 80% of the settlement will go to individuals who were minors when they were exposed to the water, the contaminated water, 65% for kids 6 and younger, 10% for children age 7 to 11, and 5% for youth ages 12 to 17. While all minors will get a share of the settlement, some will get a greater amount depending on the extent of their injuries. So, since you're with me and we were talking about it, 626 million, again, it goes to like numbers, right? It goes to like, oh, 550 billion for climate. That's great. You got to look underneath the hood. So 626 million, that sounds like a lot. That is nothing compared to the magnitude of the damage in Flint. And we don't, and they intentionally tried to conceal the magnitude of the damage. They did not have, they never had a health registry pertaining to the people that lived in Flint and drank that water for 18 months. And frankly, have been drinking contaminated water even now. I mean, I was just in Flint over the summer. People were showing me their rashes that they're actively getting.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah.
This barely covers adults. I mean, children are obviously very, very important. I mean, adults aren't doing so hot. Cancers at young ages with no pre-existing history, liver failure, kidney failure, people getting epilepsy, Parkinson's. I mean, it runs the gamut. When Jen and I knocked on doors in 2018 for a story there, I mean, we could not go a block without finding out that somebody relatively young had just died. We're talking like 40s, 50s. So the settlement, I mean, they tailored it towards children, and that's fine. But all of Flint was damaged, and 600. And by the way, this isn't just me saying that. There was a whole conglomerate of Flint residents that came out against this amount, saying it's far, far too small.
Right.
Why, as part of the settlement, are they not getting Medicare for all? Tell me that. So anyway,
Well, that's the thing, man. It's nice. Okay, there's a settlement, but you can't drink money. And you kind of just, I mean, yeah, that's great that this is a settlement, and it is way too small, like you're pointing out. But on the same note, it's like, well, also we have to solve this systemic problem. That's the bigger thing here. We need to solve this problem.
right.
So yeah, I hear you, man.
Well, how about a systemic problem that a city was poisoned by their government, and nearly 8 years later, not one person has been convicted.
Not one
Not one
person.
person has seen a jury trial. The fact that the water, from my reporting, is not safe to this day.
Hmm.
I mean, there's been a bunch of data that's been put out, but you tell me why people are still getting rashes from their water. You tell me, while residents I speak with all the time, the water smells, discolored water, people's eyes burning in the shower. It's
Oh my
easy for
God.
outlets just to report data that we broke, was manipulated, to report data that comes from extremely small sample sizes where they don't even confirm if the homes they're testing for lead are actually connected to lead lines. So it's easy to just declare it like, oh, the numbers are meeting EPA regulations. Well, if you go and talk to the residents, if you go and look at the residents, look at the symptoms, the rashes, the hair loss, you might have a different picture. But before we go, Ron, I want to get to outside electoral politics. Outside electoral politics, because
It's
I
where I
think
like to be.
I think you've talked about it. I've been talking about it. I covered the John Deere strikes that are still underway in Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, and Georgia. I went to Starbucks in Buffalo, where they're doing a union drive, and ballots are going out today. If you came to this late, Starbucks filed for a stay, basically to block the election from going forward at the 3 locations that are voting to form a union in Buffalo. But it's going ahead anyway, fortunately. So that's happening today. They're going to have a December 9th, they count the ballots. So it's going to be a month process for workers to vote whether they want a union. You have Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the biggest healthcare companies in America. They're going on strike. I mean, I can't keep up. It's like every hour I'm seeing
Yeah, I mean,
a
you
new
really, because
strike.
then you remember, it's like, okay, so what about I know there's the Staten Island Amazon warehouse where it's like they're
Yep.
trying to form a union, and you really, I mean, hopefully they are really, really vigilant there, because we all know what happened in Bessemer, Alabama. We all know, like, every dirty trick that Amazon pulled there, to the point where I believe the labor board is saying they should redo the whole thing.
Well, I actually
So,
just found out that Bessemer is redoing. They are redoing it.
yes, good.
So that is going on there. I've covered the Staten Island efforts as much as I can, and they just filed for their election in Staten Island. So there's a lot going on. I don't want to mislead the audience that it's like, yeah, general strike tomorrow. I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think we have seen. I mean, Starbucks has been the most aggressive, it seems. Starbucks and Amazon, but Starbucks has been really, really, really aggressive in this union busting effort. But to me, something that these workers are doing that the progressives wouldn't is just taking no shit and
Yeah.
just saying, fuck it, we have nothing left to lose. I really think it's psychological at this point. Workers, and I saw it when I was interviewing these workers in Iowa, they're saying, we've been beaten down for 30 years. COVID was like the final fucking hammer.
Yeah.
And we just have nothing left to lose. We can't operate this way anymore. We can't keep treading water. And they are, I guess if you want to say, voting with their feet and leaving
Yeah.
the job. And I think these union efforts are even more important, because look at John Deere, look at Kaiser Permanente, look at the hospital workers that are striking. The common denominator, they all have unions. That's why they're able to strike. That's why they're able to have strike funds. They're not going to get full pay, but some pay as part of those strike funds, some pay as part of the healthcare funds if they're on strike and the company's cutting their healthcare. So to me, if the progressives aren't going to do anything, people need something to latch onto. I'm not on board with just let's be in fetal position and be just give up. So what do you think about what's going on? Because to me, I think for the people that are falling out of favor with electoral politics, that's fine. I say it doesn't have to be either or. If there's a candidate in your local community that you think is strong, that seems, shares what we share, seems like they'll fight, I don't think you need to, unilaterally say never again. But I
Right.
do think people need to get involved in these strikes. I do think people need to take lessons from these strikes. Hey, maybe you're not working at Starbucks. Maybe you're working at a smaller company, but what's stopping you from unionizing? What's stopping you from creating local economic boycotts of the local Krogers or whatever
Yeah.
the tyrannical company in your town is? What do you think in terms of how do we keep this energy going for the workers that are part of these strikes and union drives, but even the people who are not part of them?
Well, I think for a lot of it, is mutual aid, looking out for the strikers, and a lot of that is just community involvement, getting active, locally. I think that on the larger scale, encouraging more strikes, and from a media standpoint, something that helps is actually covering them. I mean, there's more labor news now, I would say, than there was a couple years ago, and a lot of that's thanks to outlets like this, and that's all infinitely important because, you talk about electoralism, it doesn't need to be either or, definitely not. But, something that I think a lot of us lose sight of, and I include myself in this at times, electoralism is just one tool in the toolkit of change. And it's one that we all are guilty of over amplifying at times. At the end of the day, there's all these other tools, and those other tools are strikes, they're protests, they're cause based initiatives, they're direct actions, they're mutual aid. Those are all also tools that are very, very important, just as important, if not more, than electoralism. And there's also electoralism at the local level, which is different than state and federal.
Yeah.
So, I say, I always end my show by saying peace, love, and a general strike, because I do think we need one in my lifetime, and I would say, further back in American history, is pretty much as far back as you can go in our contemporary society. Good things have happened for the working class only when politicians had no other choice because they were going to lose their job or worse. I mean, the New Deal didn't happen because FDR was like, I'm a nice guy and here's a new deal. The New Deal happened because the working class, the labor unions, the communists, the socialists, the anarchists, the workers in general, they were all they didn't get along completely. They definitely had their disagreements and they butted heads, kind of like what you see now, but they got along just enough to really be a force to be reckoned with, to where you had an FDR who had the foresight to tell his rich friends, hey, we're either going to need to give up a little bit or everything, your pick. How about we do a little bit? And that's how a New Deal happened. We're back in that situation now. And, we need to have a movement that is big enough to where the people who are really running this place, the oligarchs of the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world, the Elon Musk, they need to fill it in their pocketbooks to where they need to say, okay, we got to change the system here, or we're not going to have the labor that we need to keep society functioning. As citizens in this country, the best, most powerful tool you have is your own labor. So, these strikes are huge and they are absolutely essential and 1000% necessary.
Yeah, and I think another thing also, I've grown frustrated as a reporter, and I'm careful. I've been careful to say this because I don't want to diminish like Black Lives Matter or Sunrise Movement or or any of these protest groups. It's all
Mhm.
great, but it does as a reporter kind of become a little frustrating when, all right, I'm kind of marching around the same blocks for the last 6 years, covering the same shit, covering the same chants over and over and over again, and not much changes. Not because these black people don't have the right to protest or these climate activists shouldn't be protesting, but they're only protesting with their bodies. They're not particularly leveraging their wallets, if that makes sense. So the capitalist class, in my experience and observations as a reporter, they'll let you protest. If you get a little too close to the Capitol, meaning the environmental protests getting too close to the pipelines, yeah, they'll
Yeah.
bash your head in, they'll
Or
shoot
the White
grenades.
House, they'll arrest you.
Right.
Yeah.
But overall, they'll let you go march, if you want to protest this and that. But it's not actually threatening them. It's not threatening capital. It's not threatening the status quo. That's not to say, of course, awareness and getting your voice out is important. So I'm not saying, but I've always said, imagine those George Floyd protests, because we've seen in recent history, we do have the ability to mass mobilize across generations, race, and that was over George Floyd. Imagine if even like 1/10 of those protesters did an economic action with those protests. Just imagine for a second. I mean, maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's big box, maybe it's Walmart, maybe it's fast food, corporate banking, whatever. Imagine if there was economic protest attached to it. So to me, we need to rethink protests, because the Sunrise Movement, God bless them, you could keep protesting outside Nancy Pelosi's office and marching and all these things. But if there's no teeth behind it, just like there's no teeth behind the progressives in the House and the Senate, I mean, you're not hurting them. You're not threatening any of their power, their money, their quarterly profits, nothing. John Deere, if they're going to cave, will cave, because right now there's a huge backlog. They cannot. Farmers are basically, they can't get their products on time, so they're going to have to go elsewhere. There's an actual consequence to the John Deere strike. If we saw that in other areas, if protests, even if it's, we've seen 1-day protests, right? If we could broaden that out to a week protest of certain things, if Amazon, if their profits are hurt even by the decibel point, you might start seeing change. So to me, progressives need to organize on that, because I've seen talk of like, hey, a general strike live stream or summit or things like that. Well, labor right now has a resurgence, so activists and labor should be getting together. How do we broaden out these company strikes to broader societal economic actions? Because if we could get there, brick by brick, you might actually get to the point where you could have a national strike.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and I think these conversations are very important to have. It is very important to talk about a general strike, to try to figure out how to get there. But, you know, a general strike, a huge, massive strike is a time to actually make demands. And they're not going to listen to your demands unless they're feeling something, unless they're feeling the hurt like John Deere is feeling. And I think part of the reason we're not further along there is because I think to really accomplish that, you have to look into a lot of like not as sexy things, like I think people really don't often look at how powerful the idea of just eating locally is. The idea of like, if we all just figured out how to I'm not saying you can avoid a grocery store completely. That's very difficult. I know I can't do that. But if you made every effort as much as possible to just eat locally to the best of your ability, to make sure it's like I am a regular at my farmer's market. I get my produce from a guy named Juan, which is true for me, by the way. I get my berries from Juan. I get my granola from Gigi. I get, like I know the people I get a lot of my food from. If more people really did that, and we kind of, avoided the structural things to the best of our ability, and it was with purpose, and it was saying, okay, we're taking a stand against this because this society needs to change. You're right. I mean, we would see actual change. As soon as Jeff Bezos sees something in his bank account he doesn't like, he's getting on the phone. Same with Elon Musk. Same with, all of them. So yeah, I mean, there has to be some economic efforts, but that's just easier said than done when you have a society who is just, tooth and nail all the time. When you have a society where it's like you're just one paycheck away from not making your rent or not putting food on the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. Ron Placone, you're a great man. Where can people find your content?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Ron Placone, Twitter at Ron Placone. RonPlacone.com is my website. I'm working on a movie. Some of you might know that already. You can go to GoFundMe.com and type in Left at Wall. That's the name of the film. And you can watch the trailer. You can also find it on my pinned tweet and on my YouTube channel or my Rockfin channel. You can find the trailer there as well. Check it out. It's a movie, it's kind of an explainer movie about Wall Street. Check it out. If you like it and are able to make a contribution and want to, that's very much appreciated. We give everyone a thank you shout out, and you can even get thanked in the credits. That'd be awesome. And if not, watch the trailer anyway. Let me know what you think. So
I did see the trailer. I liked it.
Thank you,
I did
man.
like it.
Appreciate
So
it.
looking
Cheers.
forward to that. All right, man. Thanks. We'll do it again soon.
All right, man. Peace.
Bye. So that was Ron Placone, comedian. Check him out on YouTube. And I appreciate him coming on tomorrow. We're going to have David Sirota, which I'm excited about. So we're going to have David Sirota go a little bit more in depth. He and the squad at the Daily Poster have been doing some good work just on the money that has been flooding in to try and stop the actual bigger package of the 3.5 trillion deal, the corruption of Manchin. So look forward to talking to David Sirota about it. Friday, we'll have our weekly exclusive on Rockfin. So a lot going on. And as a reminder, folks, we just got back from our 2-week reporting trip. So all of our content from that reporting trip, the interviews with John Deere workers in Iowa and Illinois, coverage of India Walton's campaign in Buffalo, interviews with the Starbucks workers in Buffalo that are trying to form a union, interviews with the Mercy Hospital nurses that were on strike. They have agreed to a new contract soon after we interview them. It's all up on the channel. We hope welcome to our new members that signed up while we were on the trip. We want to continue growing our membership now. Obviously, we can't be on the road 24/7, but we do have some plans for future reporting trips. But in the meantime, please consider signing up as a Status Coup member. That's statuscoup.com/join. statuscoup.com/fall. Let's do statuscoup.com/join. So you can become a member for as low as $5 a month. statuscoup.com/join. And we are going to do our members call next week. So statuscoup.com/join, members call next week through Zoom. So that's always a lot of fun. Usually goes for an hour or two. We answer your questions, comments, concerns. So statuscoup.com/join, become a member for as low as $5 a month, different levels. You can become a member. So we want to keep on growing our membership so we can afford the reporting, which is super important. Follow us on the Twitter at Status Coup. And thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow around 4 o'clock Eastern.
Don't forget the super chats.
Oh, I forgot. Almost forgot my super chats. I'm sorry. Thanks for reminding me, Colin. Aspen Fallen, $2. Thank you, Aspen. Ron Placone with a heart, $5. From Mad Ocelet God, $5. Time banks and tool libraries would be good places to put effort for those black-pilled electoralism. Also, would love to see a chat with Peter Joseph. Thank you. I don't know who Peter Joseph is. You'll have to email me. Jean Genevieve, $4.99. West Virginia is a Bernie state with fire emojis. Naz, $20. Love you guys both. Say hello to Lucy, Ron. Elisheva, new member on YouTube. Yes, you could sign up as a member through YouTube too. So you could sign up as a member through statuscoup.com/join, or you could sign up as a member through YouTube. So thank you. Naz, $10. I did not vote for Murphy because as a homeowner, he did nothing for me but raise taxes. New Jersey may turn red in 2024. Possibly. Sean Smith, $2. U.S. apartheid operates through identity politics. Thank you, Sean. Socius, $4.20. I'll send a super chat every time Jordan says boner. All right. It's going to cost you a lot of money because I'll say it. I'll keep saying it. Carrie Nonstad, tip $20. Status Coup received a tip. It's such a great tragedy. We have a right to clean water. And if something goes wrong, it is the responsibility of the government to fix it. So disgusting. Socius, $4.69. This one, just because I'm shameless, attention whore. Thank you, Socius. Appreciate it. Thank you for all the super chats. And again, sign up, statuscoup.com/join, statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. Have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow around 4 o'clock Eastern. We're going at 4 tomorrow with David Sirota. Oh, one more. Gabe, $4.99. In lieu of what Ron was talking about with farmers markets, you should bring on Matt Stoller on the show. Okay. What should I talk to Matt Stoller about? Happy to have him on. Just not sure what he's has to do with farmers markets. But thank you. I'll definitely consider bringing on Matt. Thanks, folks. Talk to you tomorrow.